Simon, you've seen this.
I have, yeah.
What is it? A witch hunt, or is there more than a hint of reality to it?
Well, that's what I said when I put it up on social media. Is it a witch hunt, vested interest agendas, or maybe, in my view, more likely to a bit of insight into the reality of the situation? Look, it's worth a watch. Of course, it's a one-sided set of observations, and people can look at people like Nick Harris, who work in certain spaces that involve themselves in the intrigue and forensic investigations into football, and see his background and see if you believe him to have currency. You can look at Javier Tebas, the head of the Spanish League, who has an agenda in certain respects against the Premier League and has made Manchester City part of his thinking. You can look at the allegations that are made throughout this. There's no Manchester City comment in there. They've chosen to not comment, and most of the time they choose not to comment. And a lot of what's said in this is a matter of fact, that Manchester City did want to stop the newspapers being able to publish anything about the Premier League. That, they sought to get an injunction against the Premier League and ultimately the reporting of it. So I think it's well worth a watch. Manchester City fans will say these questions have been asked and answered. They have not. Manchester City will say that they were cleared and exonerated. They were not. The one thing that I always found interesting is why that wasn't taken, but because UEFA seemed to make very little effort really to match pound for pound the level and depth of the legal team that Man City wheeled in to defend themselves in the Court of Arbitration of Sport. It does intrigue me why they didn't take it beyond the Court of Arbitration of Sport into the next level above it, which is the Swiss Federal Tribunal, where you can take and adjudicate beyond CAS, because there's lots of questions about the manner in which this has been conducted. My belief system and my belief, and I really, whenever Man City fans hear this, I have no envy of Manchester City. I don't care about Manchester City. I grew up watching Dennis Stewart and Peter Barnes, and tragically, with the circumstances that Dave Watson's in now, Dave Watson, and remembering Joe Corrigan and watching this side, and Malcolm Allison coached that side, and he was a great hero of mine because he managed Crystal Palace. So I don't have any interest in doing Man City down because they're a bigger football club than Crystal Palace will ever be. I don't have any of that. But I do believe there are questions that have not been answered properly. And I do believe that there is a Middle Eastern approach to the belief system, that they don't have to account for things in the same way that other people have to because of the economic might that they have. And there's nothing xenophobic about that observation. It's simply coming from a position of having done business in those parts of the world and seen the influence of great money and what great money expects to be able to do. I don't think Man City have done anything different to what Chelsea did, just timing and the legislation at the time. They were sanctioned in 2014 with a €60 million fine that was reduced on good behaviour. They were banned by UEFA for 2 years and reinstated by CAS. Some of the arguments are time barred. And what we want to see is an unequivocal, irrefutable, undeniable exoneration from Man City, rather than obfuscation, subterfuge, delay, and being the most powerful people in the room.
But they're just not doing anything at this moment. They said they're going to address it.
Well, what they're busy
while they're doing that, they're not making any comments at the moment. There's nothing wrong in that.
What they're busily doing at this moment in time is arguing about pedantics like who's chairing the independent commission, because that person happens to support Arsenal. So they're creating delay. They're creating fatigue in the transaction. They're creating a different appetite and a different attitude. And I would prefer they did this in the same way. Why would you need to put an injunction against the Mail for being able to report what was going on with the matters in the High Court about the nature of the Premier League's inquiry? The Premier League are not caught by the same covenants and the same time constraints of how far you can take back commercial deals. There are people in this mix that need to be asked better questions than perhaps they were asked by CAS. There is a better selection process that can be made available for the people that adjudicated it, because if you're looking at some of the people inside the construct of the Court of Arbitration of Sport, some of them are working within the oil and gas sector predominantly as their method of interest. So there's a conflict of interest there, because where does the oil and gas sector emanate? In the Middle East, right? So all of these things, it is worth a watch. What I would say is it's steeped in one-sided perspectives, right? Because it's only the evidence that's being put forward. If you watch it, you will be compelled.
But there's no balance to it, is what you're saying.
But because Man City have chosen not to contribute. You can look at the characters, you can look at the influence, you can look at the assertion that it's not a nation-state-owned football club when it is, with Sheikh Mansour. You can look at their chairman and look at his influential positioning within the confines of the UAE. You can look at all of it, and it's worth a watch. I think you should go into it with an open mind. but there'll be lots of people that watch it and have a view. There'll be people that are entrenched. It doesn't matter. There'll be certain people that suggest that Man City, whatever evidence they produce, will be guilty by association. There'll be certain people that suggest if Conor Ben clears his name, he's guilty by association.
Yeah, exactly.
Those people you can't convince of anything, right or wrong.
Yeah.
I look at this and I believe that Manchester City have got some significant charges to answer up until 2018. I don't believe it goes past that. I don't believe that the manner in which they've operated post 2018 or maybe even 17 gives us cause for concern that this is a going concern. But I do believe, and anyone that doesn't, you can't just sit there and sign up to a charter and then refuse to cooperate. This is not an individual theme. There is not a witch hunt within UEFA. There does need to be a clear look at the way that football arbitrates, because we've got vested interest actually deciding who judges people. And the influence that the money that these clubs have is too far-reaching, so it does need to be potentially taken out of the confines of the structure of UEFA and people of that nature to get a more strategic and forensic evaluation. And this idea that Manchester City are dealing with this head-on, they are not.
But they'll present their case in time when it suits them.
Well, they have yet to do some of that, and their main objective over the years has been to stymie and to block and to delay and to use huge financial capital to be able to use the best legal minds to disadvantage those that necessarily don't have the same resources. And believe it or not, these guys in the Middle East have bigger resources than UEFA have to be able to overcome these things. I would urge people to have a look at it just out of maudlin interest.
Yeah.
Because it's not... Some people are questioning who and why is behind it, because there's a degree of cloaked representation of who's behind it. But it's worth a watch, and it will make you think. And it will make you think, and it might make you ask some more questions.
Well, presumably it's an Abu Dhabi rival that's behind it.
Maybe. I mean, not necessarily the people in it aren't all Middle Eastern. They're all from European backgrounds. There's some interesting people that are in there. There's some people that are very well connected within the confines of UEFA. There's some people that are very well connected within the confines of football.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but I do believe if it walks and talks and sounds like a duck, it's a duck.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.